Have you seen the PET CT scanner yet?
I haven't.
No, me neither.
But I'm excited. I hopefully will like break a champagne bottle on it or something.
Those things are millions of dollars, Mark. Maybe we don't break out. Maybe like we pretend.
Okay, all right.
We like pantomime it, or they build like a fake one outside, and we can like
a double.
Yeah,
like,
break champagne.
Or maybe
on
the crate, like.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah,
we'll just smash one.
That'd be lovely.
Yeah, totally.
Well, let's make that happen.
Yeah.
Welcome to Brace for Impact, Lake Ridge Health Foundation's pursuit of sharing powerful healthcare stories made possible by you. I'm your host, Coulter Bouchard. I was born and raised in Durham region, and I'm back raising a family of my own. I'm also a cancer survivor, thanks to the amazing care I received at Lake Ridge Health and the R.S. McLaughlin Durham Regional Cancer Center. And it feels so cool being back on this floor because this is where I recovered after a stem cell transplant 3.5 years ago, the thing that finally brought me to remission. When you make that gift, when you make that donation, it feels so good, right? You're making a difference. But like, what happens to the money afterwards? What happens after you fill in your credit card information, you cut that check, what happens next? That's why we created this project. We wanted to take you behind the scenes. We wanted to literally take you with me into the hospital to give you a crash course on how that money changes lives. And that's what this is. This is Brace for Impact. This one's pretty personal for me. And if you know anything about my friend Mark Gibbons or anything about me, it's gonna be pretty personal for you too. Mark and I have a lot in common, so much that it actually gets a little weird. Like we're both fathers to young kids, we're both married, we're both cancer survivors, we had the same kind of cancer, Hodgkin's. We got diagnosed around the same time in our lives, late 20s, early 30s. We both relapsed. I relapsed a little bit quicker. And we both had stem cell transplants. We're just so grateful to be here. We're so thankful for the amazing care we got at the R.S. McLaughlin Durham Regional Cancer Center. And our families are they're happy to have us. Most of the time. Sometimes we get on their nerves, but I think on balance, they're happy to have us here. Mark and I take cancer advocacy really seriously. That man's pretty face has been all over the place for Lake Ridge Health Foundation, and he's really channeled his love of cycling into raising a ton of money for Lake Ridge Health. This is a man who I am proud to call my brother. Our conversation together is gonna make you feel every single feeling, and you're gonna find out, like a minute in, why I love this man so much. Let's brace for impact with my friend Mark Gibbons. First time back today, how'd it feel?
Yeah, it's interesting being back here.
What is it? Interesting means nothing. That's such a non-answer.
It's kind of a mix of like nostalgia a little bit. It's kind of like, there's been some like, can we say shit? Like, are we allowed to say that?
You've already said it.
Okay,
so
I've
we're
said
into
it. So like, there we go. Let's just own it. Yeah, some shitty times here, but also some good times, and almost a feeling of family with like the nursing and yeah, there's kind of something special about being here.
It kind of feels like when you visit your school as an adult, like your primary school, or like you go back when like you're an 8th grader versus you're in junior kindergarten. It feels a lot smaller. And I remember, and you probably felt the same way. Like this is your whole world for a while.
It is,
right? You're like this is literally you're gonna live or die here.
Yeah, true. And I mean, I don't know. I'm not that far out. Like hasn't even been a year yet, so it's still kind of fresh. But one cool thing, I just went to the bathroom and I didn't have to sit down.
Congratulations.
Thank
Good
you.
For
and
you.
I didn't have to sit down to pee, so that was really exciting.
What do you mean sit down to pee?
Well, remember we always had to sit down.
I never sat down to pee.
Really?
I'm admitting it. I'm loud and proud.
They always said they're like you have to sit down like when you have chemo and because
Mark they
and then you got to flush like 3 times
no.
You didn't do that?
No, because I care about the planet. Your point about not being that far out from it really struck me because I sometimes lose track of time, and that kind of feels like a little bit of a luxury. You know what I mean? Because like being here every day, getting chemo, I mean, whatever your schedule is, whether it's like once every couple of weeks. I did one, I'm sure you've done a couple as well, where it's like a couple of days in a row.
Yeah, it was like 4 days a week at one point.
I almost forgot how to get here today. My dad was in the car, and my dad drove me, he's in the room right now. He drove me to every single chemo appointment.
Wow.
Chemotherapy, immunotherapy. He lived like 4 hours away at the time.
Oh my God.
Wow. And if I look at him, I'm going to start crying, and I'm going to try to avoid that because we are 3 minutes into this.
Yeah, right.
We had a lot of time left to cry. I turned to him and I'm like, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That I don't remember how to get to the hospital.
Well, there's like a bit of weird amnesia, right? Like some of it just kind of blanks out. It's just these long periods of time, and you just don't you don't fully remember, and it comes back to you in like little bits and pieces. I don't know if you've had that.
But then there's also like, I also found myself walking through the building almost on like autopilot today.
Yeah.
We're not really thinking. You're like, it's just muscle memory.
Yeah.
So
like,
it's
let's
weird.
go for blood work. Yeah. Wash your hands. And it's kind of weird not putting a mask on. That's strange.
Yeah. It's only been a couple of years, right? We're a couple of years out from our respective cancer journeys, our quests, if you will. A couple of years out from COVID.
Yeah.
And this, like the world in general feels a lot different, but like this place just feels different. Like
for me, it was like I had this association of like I'd go for a bike ride, for example, right before treatment, get my veins nice and open. And
my dad's driving me here, and I live like a 10-minute drive away. And you're in Port Perry, right?
Yeah.
So what was the bike ride? Like an hour and a half, 2 hours?
I don't know, like under an hour to get here.
Okay, even still.
Yeah.
Come on.
But I didn't bike here for chemo. But all that to say is that I have this association of like I feel good, and then I come down to chemo, and I'm like still kind of riding that like exercise high, and then you kind of know like, oh, I'm gonna feel crappy after, right? And like the vein, like you get the IV going, and then the drip, and then you're like, right.
And then it's a couple of days later too, right? Like you go in on chemo day, and like. Yeah, you feel like garbage mentally, and like it's taxing. Like that initial treatment, and Mark and I both had Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Team Hodgkin's.
So Team Hodgkin's.
Yeah, man.
Hey, hot girl. Couple of hot girls right here. As a side note, really frustrating to hear like it's the easy one.
Yeah,
and then you get a couple of guys
Did you
who
get
like
that? Like just
all
people
the time.
being like, oh, whatever. Like
oh, it's the Diet Coke Hodgkin's. It's like the Diet Coke of cancers.
Yeah, totally.
And then we both ended up needing stem cell transplants.
Yeah,
so.
it was kind of a big deal.
Yeah, not always the easy one.
No, it wasn't easy.
But
I mean, we're still here. We're still here. So that's
we're
good.
doing this.
Yeah, they haven't killed us yet. I mean, they keep trying, but I mean, we're here.
Chemo day, like you'd finish the day and it's emotionally taxing, and like that initial treatment for Hodgkin's is ABVD. It's 5 hours in the chair, right?
Yeah.
So like that's taxing, but it's not until like I don't know 5 or 6 days later where you're like, oh, I feel like garbage.
Yeah.
I feel like garbage.
Yeah,
so like
totally.
you get here, you do it, and then the countdown kind of starts.
ABVD, that was like OG chemo.
Yeah.
Yeah. That didn't work for me, so I think you had a similar experience.
Yeah, B-Cup?
Yeah,
B-Cup,
hey,
yeah.
Team
Escalated?
B-Cup. Escalated, for sure.
Hey.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was hardcore. That was a lot of steroids, and I don't know if you got the rage from that, but that was...
No. I weigh about 9 pounds soaking wet, so...
Okay. I wanted to ask you, so, like, what was your first appointment like? Meeting your hematologist, you've got Hodgkin's. Like, we talked a bit, like, hey, you got the good cancer. Like, what was that like for you? Coming in here, walking through the cancer center for the first time.
I'm a worrier.
A warrior.
I know my
warrior or warrior?
No, not warrior. Worrier.
Warrior. Okay.
I'm a compulsive worrier. I've got a lot of anxiety, and so from the lump, I discovered the lump on my neck, and I was like, well, it's obviously cancer. It's got to be, right? And then everyone you talk to is like, nah, it's probably not cancer. And you're talking to like your family doctor, and then I went to an ear, nose, and throat specialist, and they're like, it's probably nothing, but like we'll test you, whatever, anyway. And so each successive appointment, I'm feeling more cancery. No, I didn't have any like symptoms. I didn't have with Hodgkin's, they're called B symptoms. The night sweats.
Like
you had a lot of these things.
Yeah.
The massive weight loss. I didn't have any of that. No weight to lose, but I was like, it's got to be cancer. And so then I've got a CT scan, and this was August 23rd of 2020. And then I get the results a little while later, and they were like, yeah, like it doesn't look good.
Yeah.
And then you're referred to a hematologist. And so I remember meeting him for the first time, and his nurse at the time, Irene. Well, he doesn't own a nurse, but like the nurse that worked with Dr. Nason was Irene. And like really, did you ever,
I had Irene. Yeah,
that woman got me through it.
Yeah, she was wonderful.
Really got me through it, and was incredibly vulnerable. And I would cry in there a lot, and she would cry in there a lot. And the two of them, I got a really dark sense of humor. I know you do as well. Dr. Nason certainly has a dark sense of humor.
He certainly does. Yeah,
and I think that he got a kick out of each of us, and we also got a kick out of him.
Yeah,
but he was just. Like you talk about that bedside manner, right? And like really knowing your patients. And I don't know what he's like with his other patients, but he was and continues to be really, really good with me. The same lame jokes that I've heard for 4 years.
Yeah.
Like maybe we could work on that, but also
on his material.
He needs to work on the material.
Yeah.
But also he's really good at the solving cancer stuff. So
Yeah,
maybe
he's doing all right.
Maybe don't work on the
Yeah,
material.
he's doing all right, I think.
What was it like having I assume your wife at some point visited
Yeah.
you in, when you were an inpatient here recovering? I dreaded that sometimes. I didn't want her to see me in there, see me like that. And she obviously, as your significant other did, they supported us through the entire time. Shout out to our wives.
Yeah, 100%.
But like, what was it like seeing your wife in the recovery stage afterwards? Like, you've had the transplant, you've been now transplanted from downtown Toronto to Oshawa. What's it like seeing her for the first time?
I don't know. It wasn't that big of an event. Like, we were FaceTiming and all that, so it was just I don't know. It was almost routine, but it was like I had to, we were in isolation in that like double padded room there with the ante room, right? So the kids had to gown up. Everyone had to gown up.
It's kind of devastating though to have your partner there and see you like that. No?
Yeah, it is. The whole trip, I think, is hugely difficult for we'll call them the primary caregiver, right? Because they're holding it down. You've got a kid. Life goes on, and you're trying to make that as smooth and the least stressful possible, right? And they're bearing the brunt of it all.
It's kind of like you both have cancer.
100%.
But with your significant other, they are still, you and I have young kids. Our kids were even younger at that point. My daughter was 6 months old when I was diagnosed.
Yeah.
So then that's also like my wife kind of has 2 babies to take care of, right? Still does, even in recovery. But
the largest and neediest, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But there's also the threat of like, what if we died? And then they've got to do all of this like on their own.
On your own. On the regular.
I thought about that a lot.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's rough. It affects so many other people. And,
I asked her to take my chemo once or twice, and she was like, no, I love you, but I don't love you that much.
You can scan my
like,
bracelet.
Come on, let's go. My birthday, my name. That's all they're asking for.
Yeah. They just want to get rid of it.
They're not checking ID. It's fine.
Yeah. It's like... It affects everybody, and when it's you're going through it, you feel like you're a little bit in control, but also you get all the support. Like, how are you doing? How, like, can I get you something, whatever? But no one's asking like your wife, like, how are you, right? Like, how are you holding up? And I think it's got to be an incredibly lonely and difficult place
especially
to be
during the pandemic,
and
right?
the pandemic, right? Like, none of the supports are
Can't see
available.
anybody.
So. Yeah, everyone out there who's taking care of somebody, hats off. It's difficult, and
No, hats on, because we don't have any hair and it's cold.
No, that's true, yeah. That's
Lost it all from Escalade B Cup, right?
Yeah,
Come on,
now we need another type of transplant here.
Your kids, how old were they when you were diagnosed?
So this was 2019 when I was diagnosed. So like 2 and almost 4.
So the 4-year-old can kind of understand what's going on a little bit.
Well, that's the thing, and like I didn't really know how to approach it.
Did you bank some seed, by the way?
I didn't. No, I was hard done, and so I was asking our doctor Nathan. I was like, so that means I don't have to get that vasectomy now, right?
I asked him the same thing.
Yeah, and he kind of laughed, right?
Yeah.
He's like, that's funny. You got to go get it. So
we have one child, and it one and done for us.
One and done.
Her name's Nia, and she's just the greatest. And I have to say that because I'm her father, but she also was pretty great. And she might be watching this one day.
Does anyone say, like, my kid's the worst? Like, does anyone say, like...
If I was rich enough to send myself to a decent nursing home, I could say whatever I want, but I'm really going to be leaning on that kid one day.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, okay.
And based on my lifestyle choices, that might be sooner rather than later. But so it was one and done for us.
Yeah.
But I I knew, but you just in case, who knows, right?
Yeah. So you banked?
Went in, banked it, and what a weird day. So I worked in radio at the time.
Yeah.
Worked in radio for 10 years, and so it was a Thursday because I had like a 10:30, like an early appointment, and I did afternoon radio at the time. And a few hours later, I'm like announcing and trying to keep it together on the air that like I have cancer and I've got to go and I'm starting treatment, and that was also, we talked a moment ago about. I talked a moment ago about feeling like embarrassed to have my wife see me like that, which of course is logically we know that is stupid.
Yeah.
that our partners are there to support us. But from the very beginning, I wanted to keep it a secret. I was working from home because of COVID anyway.
Yeah.
And I tried to hide it. I felt super ashamed of it. I was also afraid that I was going to like lose my job, maybe because of that, maybe not because of that, but like whatever. And just like the emotions and my daughter was only 6 months old at the time, but still trying to like keep my emotions in check, trying to still like, yeah, I'm sick, but I'm also her dad, and I'm trying to, like keep some sense of normalcy, whatever a 6-month-old can detect. But then I remember coming home from my stem cell transplant, and it was like she didn't recognize me.
That video you have.
Oh my
she's
God.
Like, who are you?
So I come up the stairs, and I'm like bald, and I had been bald for a while, right, because of chemo, and I had shaved my head because of the inability to get a haircut during the pandemic. But it was like after 3 weeks, she just forgot who I was, and like heartbreaking. And I say that I had posted an Instagram reel or a TikTok video at the time, and I'm like, oh, you're breaking my heart. And I felt like number one, I've got a chance to like get to know my daughter and have her get to know me.
Yeah.
But I talk to my child sometimes about like cancer's not, I don't like avoid the word cancer in our house. And how do you speak to your kids about it?
So, like the first time we didn't really address it directly.
They're so young, right?
They're so young, and it was like, I don't think they would have understood. And we just kind of like, dad's going to the hospital and he's taking medication and his hair was going to fall out and this and that. The second time around.
Did they ask why?
Yeah, you know what? I don't even remember. Like it was just so normal, and it was like all nonchalant. It was like no big deal. The second time, then I had a conversation.
They're a couple of years older now, because this is what, 2022?
This was 2022. So I had a conversation with them, and like separately, my oldest was a little, in an elementary school, and and I was saying, you remember like back in the day that, didn't have hair and that. Yeah, well, it's happening again, and had a conversation. And then somebody,
take me back. Let's live in that moment for a little
yeah,
bit. Are you
well,
crying? Are you like, what's going on?
A little bit. I kind of maybe got choked up, but you're trying to be strong and just kind of like, try not to project too much. But I didn't use the word cancer. Like I was just awkward about it. And the nurse was like, use the word like cancer, dispel it, normalize it, and it's important that they hear it from you and not friends or somebody in the community.
Because then you're on the defense.
And then I had them shave my head, so like they were very involved in
You're like,
the whole
gentle.
Yeah, because my youngest
gouging
is
your
pretty
head.
aggressive. Yeah, so so they were very much involved, and I was like, questions, and I'm happy to answer. And of course, they're like, are you gonna die? And I'm like, well, of course I'm gonna die. We're all gonna die, right? Like none of us are getting out of this alive, but this isn't gonna likely be the cause of death.
And sorry, this is the first time you have cancer, or the second time?
This is the second time. Yeah. So, and I think they're little champs, right? Like, and who knows like how much that gets internalized, and we'll see how much, therapy bills will be later in life. But I think I'm really proud of them, and it was cool.
What do you think that conversation will look like when they're older? And the reason I ask is my daughter's starting kindergarten this year.
Nice.
And
congratulations.
Well, I'm happy to be here for that.
Yeah. Well,
I went through a period of time, and maybe you experienced this as well. I could never like picture what she would look like when she was older. I could never picture myself there for like maybe a wedding day, or like any of these big milestones, kindergarten,
Yeah. Just based on where you're at.
It was hard to imagine a future where I would be there for that.
Yeah.
Like, did you experience anything like that? I mean, your kids were a little bit older when you were first diagnosed, but like, what was your contemplation of the future like?
I think like the first go, I was blinders on. I didn't look ahead. And
there's kind of an excitement with it that like, okay, we caught it and now I get to beat something, especially a guy like you who's like 8 days out from a transplant, you're discharged, like I'm riding my bike, I'm running, I'm out there, I'm being active.
Yeah.
And there is kind of that like, okay, there's a relief to know that these symptoms you're not being gaslit, like there is something wrong with you.
Yeah.
You know what it is, you've got a plan of attack, and let's forge forth and do this. So there is a bit of that excitement where like, okay, this will be over. I just have to do these things.
Yeah.
But also like,
I mean, yeah. I mean, overall, I think. I mean, you go to dark places, and when you come in with, with the good cancer, and you're like, yeah, you're good. Like, yeah, 80, 90%, no problem. And then
you're like, what about the 10? Look at the 10%
well, the 10%,
right here.
Right? But you don't go there right away, right? Because you're like, I'm gonna side with these numbers, and then you do 2 cycles of chemo, and then you go in for you go downtown for the scan, and
they're like, no.
Like, yeah, it's like it's okay, but it's not like it's not great.
Better.
It could be better.
Yeah.
So we're gonna think about it, and then switch the chemo. So, and then you're like, well, what happened to that percentage, right? And then we'll do 2 cycles, and we'll probably be okay after that. And then we do more cycles, and then still you're a young guy, you're taking it well. We'll hit you again, right?
I hated hearing that. You're young, it'll be fine.
Yeah, good. So,
I'm like, I had Dunkaroos for breakfast today. My body can't handle this. If I'm eating well like you, if I'm cycling, maybe I got a chance, but yeah, I might not be 90, but I feel 90. They just brought him back.
Yeah, but like statistically, right? It's a numbers game, and then you're kind of like, all right, well, I'm done. For me, at least, I know yours. Like you had like tumors grow during treatment, right? Like
yeah. So I did like you. I did the 2 rounds of ABVD, and then the escalated B a cop.
Yeah.
And then I did like 4 weeks of radiation, which is way better than chemo.
Radiation
it's
was
a party
so
in
cool.
there, bro.
It's so cool. Like
they're playing music.
You got the laser. They give you tattoos.
Yeah.
And you're in and out, right?
Got yours?
Like, yeah, I still got my ink.
Nice.
Yeah, for sure.
Still got my ink.
Yeah.
They make the face mask. You still got your face mask?
Well, they didn't give me the snorkel. I didn't get to keep it. Did
No?
Did you have the snorkel?
They made me like this mask that like holds your head down.
Oh,
because I had it on my neck and my chest. You didn't have that?
No, I had it like kind of just this like V.
Okay.
And like the burn was really incredible. Like the precision of the radiation is amazing because like it was a nasty sunburn. It burns inside your throat. I don't know if you got that,
Didn't get that.
but like where it's like cut your chest hair, it was like somebody went with like a razor.
See, I don't have chest hair either, and I didn't before, and I don't now.
Well, all that to say, you relapse, and you're like, well, that's not supposed to happen, and then you go in for the transplant, and you do the whole coordinator and the intake thing, and they're like, well,
What
there's
are the stats now?
there's a 5% chance that like this will kill you. So, hit me. And then they're like, the overall outcome at that point is like 50-50, like throw a, toss of a coin. You're playing that numbers game and you're like, well, where am I at now? And so your mind kind of, you go places. But at the same time, like for me, going in for the stem cell was like this opportunity to kind of like figure shit out, right? Things weren't going super hot, right? Like, I'm like, how did I end up here again? And I know the nurse, like, on the intake was like, you didn't do anything wrong.
And even getting Hodgkin's in the first place, it's not like,
well,
it's like a genetic mutation,
I was like,
right?
So like at that period in time, like my drinking was completely out of control.
What did the drinking look like?
It was bad. Like it just slowly got like progressively worse and worse. And it was like pandemic, but also all this like anxiety and all this like.
And this is before diagnosis.
Well, this is kind of in that in between.
I think things are,
Yeah, and like that in between phase, like we talked about earlier, it was a big struggle, and like as I went through that, and like, is this cancer coming back, and what's going on, and just I don't know, it just kind of slipped, right, and I got to the point where I was like, look, I'm doing all the same things, I'm living the same way, I'm kind of living this not ideal lifestyle. Far from it at the time. These are results, right? And so when the nurse said you didn't do anything wrong, and like, sure, we don't know what causes Hodgkin's. Like there's kind of some ideas perhaps, but it's kind of a rare cancer, right? It's kind of niche. So I was like, well, I didn't do everything right? And so being admitted. Having a month, I was like, who gets a month off from life to kind of just like have all this time, no responsibility?
Ever the optimist, Mark Gibbons.
And that's not usually my style, but there was something about this happening. It was like, this is it, right?
Like a switch flipped for you.
A switch flipped.
Yeah.
And, what am I going to do with 3 weeks? And I'm like, well, I'm going to launch this project, and it's going to be called Mark 2.0. And I'm going to leave this hospital a different person. And I said that to my wife, Lauren.
Yeah, you changed the C at the end of your name to a K.
That's never going to happen.
Mark 2.0.
That's incorrect spelling, so that's not a chance. So anyway, you went in there with sort of planting a seed, right? It wasn't like, I can't tell this story of like, oh, I walked out of the hospital, changed person. Like, it took a lot of time, but it was kind of setting this intention that, you know, things are going to be different, kind of doing like an overview of what life looks like and what are your values and how do you spend your time today. And is that like really in alignment with those values?
So what are the values now?
So,
or what were the values like at that
well,
moment?
you're like, you want to spend time, like my kids are important, my family's important, but like how much time are you actually spending with them? And if you actually like sit down and like, how much time are you working? But like, what do you do with all this time? Right. And so for me, like, it was almost a quest of understanding that time is finite. And I don't know if that happened for you, but you're like, okay, so like I'm not immortal.
Well, that's the thing.
It gets really
faced
real
with your mortality.
You're faced with mortality in a real way. And how do you use your time, right? Like, I kind of always thought, like, I've got a year to live almost, right? I'm doing this transplant. What am I going to do in the next year? And I kind of drafted that out. I want to go to a conference. I want to speak, travel, kind of do these like big pie in the sky ideas.
Have a decent bowel movement.
Also,
yeah.
because those
be nice to have
steroids.
one of those after all that chemo. My God, there's not enough Metamucil on the planet.
So it was kind of, in a way, like it was a big wake-up call. I didn't get the wake-up call the first time. The first time was a lot of denial. But
This
the
is like a
second
third
time,
chance in a way.
Yeah, it wasn't exactly. So it's third strike, right? So let's not strike out. It's kind of a weird thing to say, like, cancer in a way kind of like saved my life, really, because it was an opportunity.
When you were sitting here going through it, I mean, and you've been through two distinct periods. I had it, relapsed almost immediately, did the stem cell transplant. So it was kind of like one just giant chunk for me. You with splitting it up, like, I'm curious. I'm sure you going through it the first time were like, like everybody, it's the easy one, right? Everybody kind of survives this. I do 4 rounds, I'm done. And then what was it like coming back?
It's funny. I was going through old photos last night on my phone, and I had screenshot it one of my clinical notes.
Yeah.
And at the end, it said, patient reports biking 100 kilometers yesterday, no issues. And this was like a month out from stem cell. And
a month out?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, it was kind of like, so, when you're when you'll be discharged, like, you're gonna be bedridden for like 3 months. And I was
like, can I have 4 or 5?
And I looked at her, I'm like, no, that's not happening. And I felt pretty good. Like, just, none of the horrible things that were supposed to happen did. And anyway, so like a couple days later, I just went for like nothing heroic. But then 8 days out, I went for like 110K bike ride.
8 days after your stem cell transplant?
Yeah, I was out of discharge, and I'm out of there. So that was
like,
cool.
I'm not allowed to change diapers or mow the lawn, so that's over to you, sweetheart.
Well, that's
You're like, I'm still not changing
still not doing
diapers.
those things. I can bike, but I'm not
allowed to. I can't even do my own dishes. I don't know what to tell you. It's not going to happen.
It's the cancer.
Yeah.
I
remember doing at 3 months. I did at 3 months on the treadmill because it was kind of cold at that point, and I'm a beta. I'm not an alpha like you.
Oh God.
I did 3 kilometers on a treadmill, and I had to break it up a little bit, but like that felt like, you talk about like sticking it to the cancer, sticking it to whomever.
Yeah.
That felt good. Like those. Okay. Like I am getting stronger. I'm able to get through this. But you had the stem cell transplant like I did downtown Princess Margaret. We both recovered here at Lake Ridge.
That's right.
Yeah. Sending you off.
Yeah.
here.
You're going in the like rent an ambulance, and you off you go.
Felt very cool, by the way.
It was cool, and you're
rush
looking
hour
at
on the
the back of the
401?
ambulance, and you're like, yeah, like.
I'm like, I need these ambulance sirens on my car.
Coming back was interesting. I mean, that's a big question, right? The period between when like the treatment ends, right? You get your last drip, you go and ring that bell out there, and the gong downstairs. Did you smash that?
No, I was like, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I'm
So you're
feeling a
like,
little
no,
gun
I'm
shy.
not smashing it. I smashed it as hard as I could. But yeah, that sort of period after, and it was middle of the pandemic, just like you, and it was like, well, now what, right? And like you were saying earlier, you were coming in here with treatment, and you were seeing our doctor, and we're seeing our nurses and our team, and you're sort of supported, and you're kind of taken care of, and all of a sudden that just goes away.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, like, what's going on, right? And people kind of say, like, you beat cancer, congratulations, like, you're good now. And I wasn't. Like, I completely fell apart over, a period of like a year. And
Like what?
Like just mentally, anxiety and just stress. And I wasn't really able to identify like that it was all the time, right?
But was it the lack of routine?
It was,
as sick as that sounds.
Yeah, like, I mean, I think that's part of it. You get used to it, like, you've got that structure. And at the same time, I was having symptoms again. So, it was not that long after, and I'm getting these, kind of sweats, and I'm getting kind of feeling tired and getting.
You're feeling cancery.
Yeah, I'm feeling cancery, right? Like you've kind of, what that feels like. And so, Nathan's like, all right, well, we'll send you for a scan, and the CT didn't really show anything, and we'll send you for a PET scan, and then sure enough, something, popped up. Really high Deauville score, which indicates like the activity.
How cancery you are.
How
are.
cancery.
Yeah.
So I was like a 5 out of 5. But the problem was the site was so small and they couldn't biopsy. So the course of action that was determined was just to wait and see and just keep scanning. So that was like almost for like 9 months. And yeah, that was incredibly difficult. And
because the whole time you're like, is it growing?
Is it growing? Yeah. Happening? And then like you're like, oh, it's the same. So we'll see you in 3 months. And it was tough. And a lot of the appointments were done remotely because it was the pandemic. And it was really hard. So I think that transition period out of treatment is where there's an opportunity to frame care a little bit better. Kind of a side note, I was doing a working group here at the Cancer Center for young adults with cancer, and it's a new program that's being launched here.
What do they consider young adults?
So it's 40 and under. So I think it's
young adults.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. We
young
fit.
Adults.
Yeah, we're young
All right.
adults. Yeah. So yeah, the idea is that as a young adult, you'll have a little bit more structure and follow-ups, and you'll have an immediate referral to a social worker. And just like these touch points, right? When treatment changes, right? You've got your ABVD. Well, guess what? Doesn't work. We got to go do this. Be a cop. And you're going from you're in the chemo suite once every 2 weeks to you're coming 4 times in 1 week. And
here's some medication to take it home.
Yeah. And then here's this like nasty procarbazine that you can't eat anything, and you can't have coffee or bacon or, all the delicious foods are verboten. And, it's kind of like
too.
Cheese.
Couldn't have cheese.
Like ripe fruit. Like who wants?
The fruit. You can keep the fruit. Cheese.
Yeah, cheese.
I have cancer already, and you're taking away something else from me as well. Let the kid have some cheese.
Yeah. So anyway, have some supports as you kind of go through your journey. So that just launched this spring. So hopefully we'll get some good results out of that.
Well, I think that's a great segue to talking about fundraising. And you and I share this passion for fundraising for this. We've been through it. We're lucky to survive. We're lucky to survive twice, each of us, right? And so like this way that we can give back, and it almost, and I don't want to speak for you, I'll speak for myself here, though I think you share this, that kind of feels like you have some control. That kind of feels like I've got some direction now, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm here. Maybe you feel like you're on borrowed time sometimes, and you're like, well, what's the purpose? Because for so long, the purpose of your life was to come in and try to keep your life, right?
Right.
And now that you got your life, you're like, well, what's the purpose? What do I do? So can you talk to me about what you considered fundraising in general before you were diagnosed with cancer, and then what you know it to be now? Because you do so much of it.
Yeah, that's a great question. Before, I would say there's, very little to no involvement.
Life's busy,
and I think life's
kids.
busy and it's just kind of not on your radar. And like, I have no history of like cancer in my family. I don't really have any friends who've gone through anything like this. So it's just kind of this foreign thing. Like you hear cancer and you're like, okay, well, you're a goner, right? So my whole sort of foray into the fundraising was when I finished treatment, or I thought I was done treatment in 2020, I wanted to throw like a mega party, right? And have all the friends and rent.
When in 2020, like summer 2020?
Yeah, it was summer. Like
Okay,
I finished
so,
in like July 2020 is when
We're
I
allowed
ended.
to go outside at this point in the pandemic, right?
Yeah, anyway, so the Port Perry Hospital Foundation was like launching this campaign to raise money for a CT scanner in Port. which we didn't have and really need it. And I'm like, well, hey, I know what that is. And I, had a few of those, and, hearing what the need is in the community, I thought this would be a good way to like do something, right? But I couldn't throw that party in 2020 because restrictions and all that. So kind of paused for a year. And I got into gravel biking as a sort of thing.
Because you're very fit, you're always biking.
Well, I wasn't very fit at the time, so this is kind of a new thing.
What's gravel biking though?
It's exactly what it sounds like. It's
like with the fatter tires?
It's a little bit fatter.
Okay.
It kind of looks like a road bike,
Yeah.
but it's got a fatter tire and gravel road.
And it's way harder.
Yeah, it's good. Hills and all that, and you can take it in the forest. Yeah, it's cool. Anyway,
No,
so,
you take it in the forest.
Yeah,
I do not.
yeah. Well, we'll go out sometime. Yeah, we'll go out for a rip. Yeah,
I'll drive alongside you.
we'll come next time you have blood work. We'll meet up and
A gravel bike?
Yeah.
No, the blood work is stressful enough.
Yeah,
I don't need anything else added to my plate that day.
But so anyway, I serve on the region of Durham's active transportation committee. So there's a lot of cycling. Basically, what that is promoting alternative, safe, and active modes of transportation like biking, walking, paddling's in there. I kind of got into biking that way, and I was like, well, man, we got like great gravel in Port Perry. We got great riding in Port Perry. And we just had the Highway 7A with a big wide paved shoulder that MTO built. I was like, well, let's get people out in Port and like, let's show them that we've got like awesome cycling. Hosting a big event in the middle of the pandemic is no big deal. And I was like, how hard could it be?
You
right?
beat cancer, right?
I beat cancer. So this is
nothing.
So so that's kind of how it started. I pitched the idea to I was talking to my friend who was the president of the Rotary Club at the time, and she's like, I love this idea. I'll talk to the club, and they were all over it. And so they kind of supplied the charity and the manpower for volunteers and sort of the legitimacy, and it was a ton of work. And we put this event. 200 people showed up in the first year, and we raised like 40 grand for the hospital. So that was super cool. And then last year, 2023, was Lake Ridge Health Foundation, specifically for the PET CT here at the Cancer Center. And if you're saying, well, it's not in Port Perry, well, there's a lot of folks in Port Perry that rely on, this is the local cancer center.
Durham Region Cancer Center, yeah.
Exactly. So that's hitting that local need.
Was it you who was like, I want this money specifically to go towards the PET CT scanner, which we desperately need, and we'll get into the weeds on that in a second.
Yeah, totally. Here. So I reached out and I'm like, we're looking for a cause for this year, and there was the Our Cancer campaign, and I was just kind of got together and met up with Dana one day when I was coming in for treatment, and we sat down, and she's like, we got this thing, keep it on the DL, but PET CT, and I was like, whoa, like that's a big deal.
As great as it is to have more PET CT scanners, and as great as it is to have that available to people, I think you and I are keenly aware of, and I never know how to pronounce it, scanxiety. There's that like that dread, right, of like going there, sure, and then like the results. They take a couple of days to come in. And then do you have the push notifications? Do you get the email notification when the results are in?
Well, I go and log in and I look, but I don't have it blast out. So I go in and look at it. I go in and I look when I like want to, which is like compulsively.
Of course. Every 20 minutes.
But I love that. I love reading the results, and like you get to a certain point where you're kind of like understanding the jargon, even though the outcomes, like when I read that it was a CT scan at that time. It was prior to going for PET CT downtown. It was like you're lit up in Christmas trees and you got tumors in your spine, and it was bad, right? But
like your tumors actually have tumors as
well.
Yeah.
Your cancer's growing cancer.
If you could send the cancer in here, it has cancer as well. We need to give it a PET CT.
Exactly.
Scan. Those things are expensive.
They're expensive, and like going to PMH, like Princess Margaret downtown, it's an event. And then like we lost our Go Transit in Port Perry a few years ago, so getting downtown was.
What happened with Go Transit?
Well, they canceled our 81 bus.
Damn.
Yeah, sucks. So
because too many people are biking.
Yeah, I guess.
They're like, I guess we don't need this anymore.
Yeah, I don't need that. So anyway, they scratched that, and it was just becoming like more inconvenient to get.
Well, talk to me about, because like I know what a pain in the butt it is to get from and like I live in the Schwa.
Yeah.
To get from
Schwiggity.
And I live right off the 401. So to get downtown, like, yeah, it's the 401, you hop on the DVP, whatever. And, you know, hopefully you and I are young, right? Like I've driven myself to a PET CT scan before. Maybe you get a ride from somebody else, but like not everybody falls into those categories.
No, exactly.
You know, maybe you're young, but you don't have a ride into the city.
Yeah.
Maybe you can't, you know, you've been out of work because you have cancer. You can't afford necessarily to take public transit.
Totally.
But like, let's say you were going to take public transit from Port Perry, and let's say the bus was still running. Like, what's the time? And I'm talking round trip.
At the time, like when we had the go bus, which was like great service. It didn't have like that many departures, but if you planned around it, it was pretty convenient. I'd be from my house to downtown in an hour and 40 minutes.
Still, that's an hour.
It's a big schlep. I mean, now it's like 3 hours. So with Durham Region Transit, you're doing the milk run. So.
And then you're waiting at
and
the
then
hospital.
and then you're waiting and you're doing that, and you know, TTC probably.
You have to have your what's the before the PET CT scan? You have
the Kool-Aid, right? The chalky.
They never flavored mine.
No, but they didn't flavor it.
Speaking of milk runs, I can do like the Tang run, and I can just go to every hospital that offers CT scans.
We're just gonna do a sampling. We'll do a tasting. Yeah, what's your pairing like for?
They're like, yes, if they have one of those like Coke freestyle machines, but it's for CT juice. They're like, oh, can I get a diet vanilla Coke? This is great. So 3 hours to get into the city.
Yeah.
A couple hours to get the CT.
Yeah.
3 hours back. Maybe you have to take the whole day off work to do that.
You sure do, yeah.
That's a nightmare.
Yeah, and I know, like, anecdotally, I've heard of, you know, people refusing to go for scans because it's too complicated.
Or you can't find childcare, or you can't.
All sorts of variables.
Yeah.
Or you're just, like, too sick and getting in a car or in a bus or something. It's just not going to be great. So bringing that care close to home is you know, critical. It's more
going to
than
save
just
lives.
a convenience. Absolutely.
Like you talked about,
absolutely.
And we also have the same oncologist, Dr. Nason. Shout out Dr. N.
Yeah.
There's no oncologist like your oncologist, and there's no oncologist like Dr. Nason.
Dr. Nason's a G.
He's the best.
100%.
Yeah. He told me at one point, I thought he was joking. He goes, yeah, it's hard to get you young guys to show up to your appointments. And I was
Really?
like, excuse me?
Wow.
I'm like, people are just not. He's like, yeah, they beat it or whatever. They think they're done forever. I'm like, no, I'll stay late. I'll come for an extra appointment.
Yeah. Sign me up. Like, you sure you don't want to scam me again?
I mean, let's say you miss something. And then if you miss one, it's a lot easier to say the next time, like, I'm not going to show up to this one either.
Yeah, totally.
Like, this is going to save lives, people being closer to treatment,
100%.
closer to scanners, and hopefully they'll show up more often. I think that's going to make a market improvement.
It's going to be a huge deal.
Have you seen the PET CT scanner yet?
I haven't.
No, me neither.
But I'm excited. I hopefully will like break a champagne bottle on it or something.
Those things are millions of dollars, Mark. Maybe we don't break out. Maybe like we pretend.
Okay, all right.
We like pantomime it, you know? Or they build like a fake one outside and we can like
a double.
Yeah,
like,
break champagne.
Or maybe
on
on the crate, like.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah. Just smash one.
That'd be lovely.
Yeah, totally.
Let's make that happen.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the purpose of life, in my view, is to make sure that we're taking care of each other and we're taking care of ourselves.
Absolutely.
And yes, a lot of we were talking in another episode with Steve McDonald from the Lake Ridge Health Foundation, and I believe he said something like 40% of every dollar that the provincial government raises goes towards healthcare, something like that.
Yeah.
But that's not enough, and that's where organizations like the Lake Ridge Health Foundation come into play. And Steve McDonald was also explaining that this like rich history of, you know, like, it wasn't always the case that the government funded, and we all know this as Canadians, it wasn't always the case that we had universal health care, but like this deep, rich history of communities coming together and building hospitals and attracting physicians and also attracting people to live, attracting talent in a sense, right? To the area. And so that's where a lot of this comes into play as well, where if we want these nice things, if we want PET CT scanners, if we want, you know, these not even nice to haves, but like these necessary things.
You see this is mission critical equipment.
We've got to go out there and do that.
Yeah.
We've got to raise money. We've got to work with organizations like this to make it happen.
Absolutely. And going back to sort of that sort of 2.0 is the sense of meaning and purpose and finding something larger than self, right? Being part of community, being part of a larger cause, right? That has this ripple effect that inspires others, that triggers, you know, changes for the good. And we don't always know how that actually, you know, manifests, but we're doing those things. And so I think it's really important as humans, really, to have that sense of legacy and moving the needle a little bit in a positive way. So, yeah, it's pretty cool, I think. Yeah.
You talked earlier in our chat about Port Perry Petals and about some of the initiatives you've been part of.
Yeah.
I dipped my toe into the water for the first time with the Edge Walk, the CN Tower Edge Walk a couple of years ago. You ever done that?
No, I'm not that brave.
Oof, neither am I.
Okay.
Still not.
And?
Oh my God, like one of the scariest things in my entire life.
Yeah.
So I very reluctantly went and did this.
Okay.
I was getting some maintenance therapy after stem cell transplant, at least for Marc and I, and hashtag everybody's different, but we got an immunotherapy drug called brentuximab. And so I'm going in for it's every 3 weeks or whatever. I'm going in for my 30-minute, drip. And one of the nurses comes up to me, Maggie Abbott. I love Maggie a lot. And she was like, hey, now that you can't go anywhere and you have to listen to me because you're tied up for the next 25 minutes, I'm signing you up for the CN Tower Edge Walk. And
no way.
Remember, you beat cancer, and it sure would be a shame if you said no to this.
Wow.
Because, you should be giving back. And I'm like, yes, Maggie, I will go.
Wow.
And then I think it was like a month or two later, and I'm terrified of heights. Terrified of heights.
Yeah.
And if you've never done it, don't. If you've never done it, you're in like a skydiving suit, where it's like aerodynamic
like
or something
I Fly,
like that.
but for real?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
But it was started, this was the second year, and unfortunately the woman who started it, Sandra Jack, passed away before she could do the second one, but had convinced oncologists to do it, had convinced nurses, who in turn convinced me to do it. So I guess that's part of the continuing legacy of Sandra. But you don't need to have been through cancer. You don't need to have been through any kind of health ordeal, trauma, whatever, to raise money for this. Whether you're, contributing, whether you're doing annual gifting, whether you're doing a monthly contribution, $1, $1 million, whatever it is, or organizing an event like Marc.
Yeah.
You get involved with the foundation, you can submit a couple of bucks, but it's also really cool, and you can attest to this, to come up with a fundraiser.
Yeah.
To have that legacy.
Absolutely. And I think there's no shortage of opportunities to get involved if you're looking to.
And all of the people, right? We mentioned Irene and everybody that works in the hospital and everybody that works for the hospital foundation and all of the people that are raising money for it and just every single human being that is part of this giant chain, they're community members, right? And these are people that, you're shopping at the same supermarkets as them and you're sharing the same roads as them. And, we've talked about this so many times in this chat, but the importance of supporting each other, the importance of supporting your community. And it feels good. It feels good to give money. It feels good to fundraise in any form, whether it's writing a check, whether it's, starting your own fundraiser, Port Perry Petals. But it all comes back to focusing on local, focusing on the people around you. We really need to build up and support each other.
Absolutely. And the beautiful thing about local is that you're helping, it's direct, right? The impact is visible.
You can drive by the hospital and
you
you're
can see
my $20 a month donation paid for that.
Right? There was just a donation for 6 new chemo chairs, and these are amazing, and
these are super.
They're super comfy.
Can we talk to the vendor? These are nice. Get one of these at home.
They're really nice, and these weren't always here, and it's because people in the community have stepped up and gone that extra length, and valued and wanted to make sure the patients in here are comfortable and well looked after, and it's a beautiful thing.
Thanks to Marc Gibbons for joining us on Brace for Impact, presented by Lake Ridge Health Foundation. We want to give you a sneak peek behind the scenes look on how donor support makes all of this happen. We want to inspire you. We want to motivate you to make a difference in your own way, because it's people like you that are making a difference in this community. My name is Colter Bouchard. Join me by giving or getting involved at braceforimpactpod.ca.